what we're going to do is we're going to use a small repository. So this is like a repository I created called Task Manager. It is built in Python. And currently it actually uses what we call Pydantic framework, and it's on Pydantic V1, which is like one of the older frameworks. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to upgrade that. So we'll kind of like, the reason I'm showing you this repository is one, it's I think open source, if I remember correctly. It is public, yes. So I'll share this also in the chat. So people may want to kind of like look around, skim through, they can do so. Where did the chat go? Okay, there you go. And second is kind of like, I'm just going to quickly walk through some of the concepts of runbooks that we showed in the demo, how they kind of like relate with our actual product. And after that, we'll go into the actual execution. So you might be familiar with this kind of like a dashboard. These kind of things are becoming more popular ways of just getting started with the task. So a typical way of starting a migration or any kind of work is you kind of like provide some high level concepts here, then start a new chat. Before we go into that, let's kind of like just go over quickly a few things. Here, this kind of like gives you a view of all the things that you're working on. And again, the most important thing about this framework is it's not something which is specific to you. It's something that you share with your team and your organization. So essentially, you're not even just looking at everything that you have. You can also kind of invite others and see who else are participating in this, and be able to kind of like look at other people's work, be able to kind of like jump into somebody else's task and help out and provide feedback. The third thing I will share is the library. So this is the library that I also mentioned during the demo, during the slides. This is a system of templates that you can create, and your entire organization can actually reuse them. So think about like this, when we are actually, doing a migration in a small code base, you can actually use that as a starting point for other people in your organization to be able to leverage that to create a migration for themselves. And this doesn't have to be limited to migrations. We definitely find migration is a very interesting and important use case, but you can also imagine like, creating a new Java service or, building a new front-end component. All of those things you can create templates for. And these are some things that people can use, or like every developer can use, to perform those specific actions. And we'll kind of like go through how these can be created. This is the context part. This is, I think, one of the most important part of this run. So every time something is executed, the agents essentially capture all of the learnings and create these micro learning systems that can then be used as context for future. Now, this is kind of like similar to if you use any kind of Claude code or codex, that they're like MD files, like markdown file, like claude.md or agents.md. But imagine these things can become really big, right? So what we do is essentially capture all of these things as micro learnings. And depending on the task at hand, we extract the context which could be useful, some of the previous learnings, and then apply that or share that with the agent. And the advantage with this is you essentially save a lot on the context window. Instead of having very giant markdown files which have to be constantly updated, this system automatically captures all of these things. And you can export them whenever you want, and then kind of like store them somewhere else if you need to. And last but not the least, quick overview of our settings. We will talk a little bit about like stack PR concept as well. But let's just go into the Claude code config. Given that we mentioned it actually uses Claude code, you can actually use your own custom API key. You can specify all the MCPs, as well as you can specify like the allow and deny list as well. So these kind of like things actually make it easier for you to customize and be able to use the configs, or like the way you would actually use Claude code. Let's just go into the demo. I'm kind of like actually going to skip over sandboxes and personas, but like you can always find this information in our documents. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to ask let's migrate the Pydantic framework from V1 to V2. And our goal with kind of like prompts is really, there are three things that AI typically needs. One is a specification, one is a prompt, and one is a context. And all of those three should be the least useful information that you provide. It's definitely very directional, but think about this, right? In your organization, everyone would have different ways of expressing an answer or a question or a task. And we don't want multiple people working on different, like same task with different prompts getting different results. So that's why a framework like Runbook, although it relies on the prompts, vast majority of work actually is the context and the specs that are generated are used in this process. So I'm going to go with Task Manager and let's get started. So the first thing the system is going to do, it spins up a remote instance and it will actually set up the environment and check out your repository. So as you can see, it has already checked out the repository. Depending on the size of the repository, it might take some time. We also have what we call SSH sandboxes, where you can actually like run these sandboxes in your own environment, and then it will go and investigate that. Sorry, it will go and log into that and use everything from there. This also creates a great security layer on top of it. So the first part we actually did was a quick research. Given that this was a short code base, actually did research pretty quickly. Here it comes and asks you some questions. And I think these are also one of the most important parts. The further along you get into the process, the lesser review you have to do. So you start from kind of doing the research where you spend the most time doing the review. Then you go into the plan where you're also doing the review, but it's kind of like less than the research. And then the last is the code. And our goal is by the time the code is generated, the amount of review required is very little. So I'm going to go and like try to answer some of these questions. Okay, so should I update all patentic models through the code base to use? Yes, let's update all models. Okay, are there any specific patentic features you are currently using that you want to ensure work correctly in V2? Custom validators, ORM mode, config, classes, root,
All of them.
all of them. All right. Should I update the dependencies in the requirement file to specifically, or do you have version constraint I should follow? Please update the dependencies directly. Okay, do you want me to run existing tests after migration or verify nothing breaks or just perform the code migrations? Please also verify. Why would I not? Test and fix any test before finishing the task. So depending on the number of questions, you can also like skip some of them. You don't have to answer everything. Sometimes you can also let the agents decide, but these are actually still very helpful pointers. And again, as you can see, the main thing we did here was we started with a very small prompt, and the user can actually specify a prompt in many different ways. And the goal here is like, you're just starting a task and let's work together before we actually have the agents go and implement this. So at this point, what's happening is we have checked out the code base in this sandbox. And as you can see, many of these messages that you're seeing are coming directly from Claude Code. If you have used Claude Code, this is actually a very similar experience, right? It's kind of like showing you some of the things that it actually is processing, reading, understanding all of this. And it may come and ask you more questions to kind of like clarify the details. In most cases, it will actually generate the runbook itself and help you, like ask you to verify it. So there you go. Again, small code base. So it only took 47 seconds. We intentionally chose a small one so we can actually do a live demo. At this point, it kind of like created the runbook for you. And this is like what we call actually the runbook. It has a few steps. It is broken down into 3 top level steps, which is update dependencies, migrate models, and update the test suite. Each of them itself will have like certain substeps. It may or may not have substeps. Like if a step is simple, it will probably just describe it as a top level step. And then it also has like some of these things. So as a testing part as well, right? Depending on kind of like, what you're trying to do, if you're doing a very large migration, you may also want to kind of like ask for some suggestions on manual test. This is also something we skipped over the persona. You can actually specify some of those details. Think of persona as system prompt. So you can provide more details in system prompts so that the agents may create runbooks in a specific way. So as Chris was saying before, this actually like helps you break down the task into smaller steps, and you can update the step one at a time. And that's also like one of the beauty of this is like, in this first case, it's actually only updating the requirements file, so it might not actually do a lot. But once you start doing the code changes, it will become more clear on how it is working and where we need to do course correct. So the next thing is as simple as kind of like saying, okay, you can execute the next step. If you feel like it's a small work, you can actually execute all steps together. But generally, we recommend you do one step at a time so that you can kind of like follow along on how things are going. So at this point, I'm going to just at least let's just do like entire step one, which is only going to update the requirements and see how it goes. We might not be able to get through the entire migration in time, just kind of like making sure we stay on schedule. But this is also one thing you can actually go and edit any of these steps. In fact, you can even do it while some of the things are going on because you can't edit something which is actually being run at the moment, but you can actually edit manually or even provide like some suggestions to the user, sorry, to the agent to go and modify these runbooks. And if you kind of like look into the details, these specs can be very detailed. And this is very intentional. The more details you get here, the lesser chances there will be that the final migrations generated will have errors. So looks like it actually did step 1.1 as well as 1.2. So it did commit these changes into this branch. If I want, I can actually like go and create a PR, or I can just like look at the diff. So let's just look at the diff, what happened. There isn't really like any rocket science here. So I'm gonna actually continue before we create a PR. And I do want to show kind of like, once we create a PR, what happens. But let's kind of like let it run a little bit of the cycle as well. Let me know if anyone has any questions meanwhile. It might take like a minute or two for this one to finish.
So one of the other things that I like about this is you can also use this to identify your gaps. And so, yes, it can help you validate what you're going through, but being that human in the loop part of, to the question somebody asked about, testing, like, all right, well, here's exactly the steps that are going to happen while going through testing. Is this going to be enough? Maybe, maybe not, but you're going to be able to clearly see what's in line and even where it's going to go and try to execute some of those things.
That's right. Actually, I am gonna continue some of more steps so that we get some more material to verify. That's right. Actually, like all of these steps helps you be able to kind of like, manually go and verify each of those things to make sure you can course correct. And many times we see kind of like, we were talking about one shots. We do have like one shot capability in this as well. You can actually like run it directly through Slack. But those things are like, nice and fun things to do. You can actually easily do that with any other things. You can kind of like, ask Cursor to do it. You can ask Cloud Code directly to do it in the terminal. But the beauty of kind of like, being able to do larger tasks is that it requires initial cognitive load to actually understand what's going on. But once you do this like a few times and you're kind of like in a place where the agent has good understanding of your code base, these things become really powerful. And that's because, similar to how when you hire a software engineer, it takes them some time to actually get up to speed. And you expect, there is going to be some investment there. But once you kind of like get there, everything else becomes a lot simpler. And that person actually like starts contributing very actively. So we think of this model as somewhat similar. You are picking off the shelf agentic systems and you're essentially creating memory layers for it. So it becomes smarter as you use it.
Another really good use case that I've kind of seen here is just around bugs in general. Like if you get a bug or anything kind of submitted, you can have a run book that just goes and tries to solve it, gives you a PR. And if it doesn't get a high enough, kind of confidence score around like what it wants to or what it thinks it needs to do, it submits a report back. And you can have this really solid set of workflows. So you don't have to have your engineer go and try to diagnose what the problem might be, kind of run through the playbook that you would expect it to. It can do it for you, bring that information back to your engineers, lowering the amount of time they're spending on some of that kind of keep the lights on maintenance work, and allowing them to be able to leverage their expertise in the code base to be able to then quickly validate the PR, or be able to inject new context into it to be able to then hopefully resolve that problem a lot faster than you would in the past.
Right. I think a couple of other things also worth noting is with this kind of a model, you can also run your own sandbox. And the advantage of running your own sandbox is you can actually provide all the tools that you use. You can provide all your testing infrastructure, which means is now an agentic system, while running through a spec, also has a way to actually validate end to end. It can also create previews. So you can go and verify the previews, even share a link with somebody in your team to kind of go do the QA. And these sandboxes will also have these branches. So you can easily connect with the sandbox, make changes if you need to, and push more. So the idea there really is to kind of treat the system as almost like you're bringing another engineer in your team and provide everything that you would typically do to an engineer, right? You're providing it all the knowledge bases, you're providing it with all the kind of tribal knowledge, you're giving review feedback, you're hand-holding them initially a little bit, with the expectation that more you're doing it, the better the system gets. Okay, I am gonna actually dequeue this one so that let's have this be the last step, and then we can kind of actually create the PR. Let's see how far it's gone.
I had a question while you dequeue things. So is it checking in with PRs or stack PRs for every step in the runbook right now?
Can you explain? Sorry, can you ask it again? I didn't understand by checking in.
So when it completes a step, is it committing essentially, or is this all running and it hasn't made the code changes quite yet?
No, it's definitely so all of the changes, so you can see 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah, okay, this is what I was looking for. Thank you.
So all of these things are getting committed. Now we do have a concept of stack PR. Sounds like you're at least familiar with that. So with stack PRs, each of these things right now are separate commits. We have configuration through which, let me just open that in a separate tab here. So I can go in the config and I can say right now I'm creating PRs in a manual mode, which means it is merging all these changes to a single branch until I create a PR. Once I create a PR, it will base off of it and create a new branch and start committing there. You can also automate this entire process using a stack PR mode, where it automatically creates these stack PRs after every top level step, which is after if it would have done step 1.1 and 1.2, it will have created a PR, and the next PR automatically gets created as 2.1 and 2.2 on top of it. So that's why all these steps are run sequentially, and the stacking can happen as one of the workflows. Right now we are in the manual one, and you can also do a single PR where it's okay, we always only want to actually have a single PR. The thing is, many people are actually not familiar with stack PR concept. So we also want to make sure people understand and kind of manually can control that workflow.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, looks like this one is also done. So what I'm going to do is let's just create a PR. And I'm actually in this is our dummy account. So I'm not connected with my GitHub in this dummy account. But if you're connected with the GitHub account, the PRs are actually created as you as authors. And I think there's some nuances to it, but it's important in some cases to actually have PRs created as authors so that you actually are incentivized to share with somebody else for review as well. Because right now I can actually go and review this thing and approve and merge it myself. But in this case, I'm not doing, if you actually connect your GitHub account, you'll actually have your user as the author, which means is now you need somebody else to review it. Another thing to note here is I created a PR in the middle. Right now, it still has not modified the test. That means the tests have actually failed. Now, if I look back here, as soon as we created the PR and the test failed, it automatically detected that the CI has failed. And now it's going to look at like, okay, why the CI failed? Let's investigate and try to fix it. Now, this is also like one of the important parts of this workflow is the work is not done until the verification is done. Even if you create these PRs in the middle, it's important that, we are running all these verifications. The goal of the agent is not to just complete the task, but make sure it's accurate. And the same thing goes, we can actually also can look through the code and provide it with some comments as I would do for a regular PR. And then the agent will also pick those things up and actually address comments as well. So it's end-to-end workflow in that sense. It actually kind of like, handles all these, like the feedback, the human in the loop part. And that I think is like very important part of doing the entire migration. So we'll let it run a little bit, but I would say maybe we should try to kind of like wrap it up here. I think this is definitely like an interesting use case. I've already shared the repository with you. You can actually go look at it. You can also like provide feedback here and you can see how it works. Let me actually do that for one of them. There is v1 config style. Is there anything? Okay, I'm gonna just do a simple one. Let's just say put all package names in separate lines. So the only thing is like, we don't want it to be too aggressive. So you actually have to say aviator revise for it to pick it up. And that's pretty much it. So as soon as you kind of like post these comments, you can see there was like an emoji, which means like this has registered that there was a review feedback. Now, one of the things is right now it's actually running this operation of verifying the CI. So it's going to try to finish the CI verification before it starts picking up the review feedback. So just like queues it up, looks like it was able to address the CI. And now you can see like as soon as it finished the CI, now it's kind of like picking up the review feedback that you provided, and it's going to work through that. So that's pretty much it. And it did add a comment here for kind of like, trying to fix the CI. And obviously, if the CI is still not fixed, it's going to continue working. We have like some configuration on controlling some of this behavior. But that was at least the basic workflow of how you would actually work with this. Last but not the least, one of the things you can do is you can go and publish this as a template. And what that means is once you publish this as a template, it's available in the library, and then other people can pick this up and go and use this same template either in a completely different repository or in a repository, same repository and a different code path to go and apply the same migration there. And maybe we can do that demo in a separate session, but like one of the things it actually does is it modifies the playbook to actually apply to the code base that you've shared with it. So if you kind of like provide a different repository or a different code path, it will actually review the steps and make sure that those steps apply for this code base. So you don't have to kind of like do a manual code mod. Here it actually kind of like adjusts automatically itself to the code base you provided it and also captures the new context based on the task itself. So I think that's pretty much it. Like I'm gonna just end this here with publishing the template that you can go and like share with others. Other people can just go and like use this plan, choose a different repository, and like provide some special instructions to kind of like modify the plan.